Hey guys, so we're bouncing back and forth as you might expect. We do it from time to time, but I'm still working out little bugs on the charger or little items that have been nagging, and that's just part of the car building process. But what's happening and what's happened since the very beginning of firing this car up is I'm not, if I go to crank it with the key switch inside the car, it'll crank, but it won't fire. And then if I leave the key, say I just try not to start the car with the key switch, but just turn it on so the gauges come alive, I can jump out the the starting solenoid or relay on the firewall, and the car will run. So, with that said, my mind tells me that everything behind the dash is correct. What I did notice is the gauges power down when I'm cranking, so that tells me that there's no ignition run. There's ignition crank, but there's no ignition run. So so I've done some searching around, and again, it all goes back to that American Auto wire. If you've seen the previous videos of me wiring this car, I was having a hard time towards the end terminating the ignition 1 and 2 wires because the schematic is kind of vague. So I called American Auto Wire and talked to them, and they actually admitted that they made a mistake and they should have outlined it better. Good guys, they're really good to work with, but they basically just made a mistake. And it's crazy to me that I'm the first guy with the Gen 2 charger that is coming across this, or maybe I'm not. I don't know. They seem to think it was kind of an anomaly. So anyway, so here I'm gonna roll this car back so I can get to it. But I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do to fix the problem. So what I've come to realize is, in order to get ignition 1 and 2 to work, I need to get, so here's ignition 1 right here. So that's the yellow wire here, and that goes to the solenoid pole on the relay. And I've got ignition 2, this brown wire here, on the ignition circuit. So what I'm going to do, and I know it seems kind of trivial at this point, but what I'm going to do is do a junction, connect the yellow and brown wire to my big number 10 ignition wire here, and then jump out of that and go back to the solenoid, and I believe that'll solve our problem. So that's the plan. But yeah, so I've been driving this car around, but it's just so annoying to have to go under the hood or turn the key on, go under the hood, jump it out, fire it up. The car runs great. It runs really well. In fact, I've driven it a few times, and I really haven't even tuned it. I just kind of tuned it by ear. So yeah, let me get set up to do this. I have the parts and tools here. Just got to get set up. I'll be right back. So pull this guy out. Another thing I was struggling with was my editor installed this relay on the firewall a while back, and I thought there was threads cut into the firewall, like there'd be like 2 weld nuts on the backside, but there isn't. It's just sheet metal. And so the 1/4 bolts that hold the solenoid were just spinning. You can kind of see them right there, those 2 guys right there, and they weren't making a good contact. And then also, if you see that there's no ground pole, usually these are grounded, like the earlier ones are grounded, or they have a ground tab on them, so you run a ground wire from them to a ground source. But this one is missing it, so you have to actually ground the mounting tab behind this guy on the firewall, so you basically have to strip the paint. So what I did was I used some nutserts, some 1/4 nutserts behind this, so I can get a good ground, and I used some lock washers and regular washers just to hold them in there. And now it's totally secure, and it starts starts up every time. So that was another part of my problem. So I had two issues going. I really only thought I had one, but I had two, but I've solved that one since. So now it's just down to the wiring. So I'm gonna find some more of this yellow wire, because I always save my wire clippings in case I need to come back and use it for something else or another project. So I'm gonna go grab some of that yellow. So I'm gonna need some more of that because I need to go to this connector. I need to redo this guy. So I need to connect both brown and yellow to this pink ignition wire, and then I need to jump the yellow out of that connection and come back to here. And doing it right is important, so I'm going to take the time to do it. So I'm going to go into and do two on each side. I'm going to do the brown and the ignition on one side, just so I don't overload the connector and make it harder on myself to connect all four of these wires. You'll see what I mean in a sec here, as soon as I get this stripped back and ready to go. I'm using those crimpless butt connectors, which I really like, but you got to do it right, and it's got to get hot enough, otherwise they don't work very well. But I'll show you. They're made by I'm sure they're Chinese, called K-Ject. I just got them off Amazon. A buddy of mine turned me on to them, and I haven't used a ton of them here on this car, but when I needed one, I was glad I had it. Okay, so yeah, these are those little guys that have that. So it's shrink. The whole thing is a shrink wrap, but then they have this. It's probably not lead, but like a solder ring inside of them. Really cool stuff. No more crimping, and especially if you have like an insulated crimp terminal, when you crimp it, it creates a hole, and then when you shrink it down, a lot of times the hole doesn't get filled back in, which would cause like a exposed metal on the crimp eventually rotting away. Yeah, that's in extreme situations, obviously, but something to be aware of for longevity. And let's face it, you want to build a car for longevity. You don't want to have trouble down the road, so trying to avoid that being on the side of the road. Okay, so these are the bigger ones, and they're try to keep my wires the same length when at all possible. So now I need to remove this guy. Grab my little tool really quick. Grab that. There we go. Just want to remember to use that guy. So now I need a double. So these are considered F terminals just because of the shape of the connector where you crimp. And so I'm going to get rid of this guy. And I'm going to make two. Or, actually no, I'm not going to make two. I'm going to make a jumper. I'm going to make one for this to connect here, and then I'll make another one for the plug to go to the solenoid or the relay. So I've got that guy. And so the F terminals actually come in, I think, two different sizes. One for one wire and one for two wires. And you can tell, I'll show you in a sec here, the difference. Here's the difference on these. Yeah, see they're shaped like F, or the letter F. So you can see the difference of these two. One accommodates one wire, and the other one accommodates 2 wires, and they're supposed to sit side by side. Just a little ditty for today. Wait, I shouldn't use that word, should I? It's probably not a good idea. That's the lesson for today. So I always lock down the copper first, and then you can get a good grab on the insulation as well. Probably should have confirmed that this connector fits, but I'm pretty sure it does. You got to make sure the connectors will fit inside the plug that you're using. Oh, you know what? I did that wrong. Just confused. Don't mind that. I only need one. So I'm gonna put these guys together, and like I said before, just want to make sure they're coming out the same place. This does all need to get buried, or all needs to get organized in the wire looms, which I plan to do soon. I don't like to bury all my wires in loom until I know everything works perfectly, so that's why I haven't done that yet. You can see how neat that is. That's why I like these little connectors, because you can, so the trick that I've learned with these is to get the ends locked down first. So basically it holds the wires first, and they take a whole lot of heat too, so even this heat gun isn't really as hot as I wish it was. But so if you get the ends locked down first, it'll get a good grab on them so they don't move. Again, tying up loose ends here. This is my brake switch light, so this is going to connect to this proportioning manifold down here, and if one of the banks, front or rear, loses pressure, this goes to ground. So basically you have your input here for the brake light, which is actually on the dash, and this light, once grounded, or on the light on the dash, once this goes to ground, there's a shuttle valve inside here that'll actually close off one side of that master and allow you one more chance to brake with just either the front or the rear wheels. But you'll have that red light on the dash, so that's what I'm trying to achieve here. And with this little boot that comes with the master cylinder, I'm going to run these wires through here so it looks nice and tidy. And I've already got my ground wire, as you can see in there. I ran it kind of long just to make sure I have enough slack in case I think I might just go to the battery with it. Seems to be the cleanest solution. But this guy here, just going to use some weather resistant female blade terminals. Not a huge fan of these guys, but they're fine because they're going to be actually under a boot, which is more ideal than not under a boot. So and then there's no polarity on these. You just go right to them, meaning you can connect to either of these terminals with the ground or the power. This is all the stuff that I just kind of jumped over to get the car running and driving. So now that it runs and drives, just gonna lock this stuff in and call it good. I did figure out the reverse light situation as well. It was just really more of an interpretation and understanding it. So now I'm going to use this ground wire. I try not to have too many grounds, you know, in different places. I like to have a main ground for the frame, or subframe in this case. Just keep the clutter to a minimum, really. But this is pretty traditional, though. The way I'm running this wiring is, you know, down the inner side of the inner fender, which is where the factory did it. But I mean, obviously, this is not a factory type build. This is just my version of it, I guess. But yeah, all this stuff needs to come apart once I get it ran, and I'm gonna loom it. And more, you know, mostly it's aesthetics I'm trying to go for here by looming it all. But the one of the bigger issues is when you have big power wires running past smaller wires, there's a lot of current going through those big power wires. So for instance, my AC, it has two big power wires going directly to the battery. The MSD box, my ignition box, has two big power wires, so those two wires are running quite a bit of current, especially the MSD box, and they're going straight to the battery. Well, they're passing right past through all of this wiring. Plus I've got my two positives, huge gauge like number 6, and let's see, I think this is 1 gauge, this big stuff, battery cables. So a lot of current goes through those. I haven't ever had any issues. I have with stereo stuff, but no interference issues as of yet. But I do always try to loom everything and kind of separate it, which is what I'm going to do here. So before we find out if this thing will run off this, I'm going to pull these little clips here and start to tidy everything up. Alright, so here's an update. I've got all my wires all separated out here in this this loom. This is a high resist, or it's like spec or Tech Flex, but it is actually a different. It's a brand. Well, it's Russell, but it's very similar to like Holley Tech Flex. But I basically covered everything in it just to make it look nice and tidy. And the stuff actually comes with this tape that you use for your ends, so they don't fray and they don't come undone. But while I'm building it, I usually use zip ties to kind of capture my ends so they don't get buried. And then of course when I go to reconnect everything, I count all my powers and grounds. But the stuff's really easy to work with. It doesn't hurt your hands. I have a box of it over there in a few different sizes, and just basically tidying up things as I go. As you can see, my ignition 1 here is now powered up with the brown on the other end with the little K-ject connector. Hopefully that's good. I haven't had one fail yet. I'll keep you posted on that. Got our good ground on the firewall relay, starting relay, and I do have some more of these factory clips, although I'm starting to realize that I may not be able to use these guys, because with all the wiring with the heavy gauge stuff, these were never really meant to accommodate that, and now that I have covering on these wires, it's just going to make them even fatter. So I'm not quite sure. I might replace these with some Adele clamps at some point. But for now, I think I'll probably just connect them with maybe one, or lock down one of the wires and then zip tie the other 3, plus my pneumatic lines there. There's just a lot going on. And when you're building I guess you could call this a resto mod, that would probably be the best classification for this car, hence this. But it's, I mean, aside from the two big power wires for the MSD stuff and the air conditioning stuff, everything's pretty much stock, like what a charger would have. But obviously you have your main fuses, main fuse safeties there, and I've added some relays for the headlights, so I get brighter lights and less voltage going through the headlight switch. I still have to do some tidying down here on these headlight wires, and obviously pneumatic lines down there too, but I'm just trying to focus on this area, get this all tidied up and looking good. So but yeah, that's so far that's where we're at. I gotta keep going. It's confession time. So this channel is a real channel, and I show my mistakes here, as you've seen if you've watched the channel for any amount of time. But I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake, and here I am telling you guys what to do. And you know what? It doesn't always happen that way. It just doesn't. And it's not that I'm peddling nonsense. It's information I've gathered on my own. And this whole Dodge thing is totally new to me. This is my first Dodge build. And it's an entire build, so every little thing that could go wrong has gone wrong. So back to the ignition wiring. So if you join the brown wire and the yellow wire to the ignition output, so I'm talking about, this is ignition and crank, this brown wire is ignition run, so or otherwise known as ignition 1, ignition 2. Ballast resistor is not being used in this case, so cool your jets, internet. I know you guys want to jump on me for it's the ballast resistor. I'm not using a ballast resistor in this case because I'm using MSD ignition, and so that eliminates the ballast resistor being used. And for those who don't know, ballast resistor is meant to knock voltage down to the ignition coil. I'm using a modern ignition coil from MSD, which requires no less than 10 volts. So anyway, so I had these connected yesterday, as you guys saw, well, a few minutes ago in your land. I had them connected. When I went to crank, it still did the exact same thing yesterday, and I'm thinking, oh my god, what is wrong with me? I understand the concept, and that's half the battle, understanding. So basically what happens today is I was tidying up some other stuff, kind of racking my brain as to what is going on here, and I noticed my ignition 2 output here on the bulkhead connector had been pushed this way, so it wasn't contacting. Why this thing ran by me jumping the starter solenoid, I have no idea, but it did. So it wouldn't crank on the key ignition, or it would crank, sorry. It would crank, but it wouldn't run. But if I left the key on in the ignition on position and came out here and jumped the starter relay with a screwdriver like you see everyone doing on those Will It Run videos, it would run. So don't ask me how that works because I have no clue. So I pushed this guy back in just with the small flathead, cranked it just a few minutes ago, and the starter, not only did it start on the ignition key switch, the starter kept going, which tells me our brown guy here, or I'm sorry, our yellow guy here is basically getting full voltage, and that's not what we want. We just want voltage on crank only. So I'm going to go ahead and put this guy, this clip or connector, back on and separate these guys out, put a nice connector here, and we should be good to go. But I just wanted to correct that so none of you guys go down the rabbit hole and start cursing me for misleading you. So again, sorry, I make mistakes, but I'm here to tell you I made a mistake and I'm correcting it. So